Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're taking on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
A classic.
It is, but with a twist. We're going to be focusing on the creature's perspective.
Oh, interesting. So not so much Victor Frankenstein, the ambitious scientist.
Exactly. The excerpts you provided, they're mostly from the creature side, like his diary entries, his personal thoughts.
We'll get his take on, well, everything.
Exactly, from his first moments of consciousness, all the way to that confrontation with Victor.
A journey, I imagine, is filled with quite a bit of angst.
Absolutely. You know, his struggle to understand who he is, his longing for connection, and how that all gets twisted into rage and revenge.
It really makes you question how much of the creature's monstrosity is, well, inherent, I guess, versus how much is shaped by the way everyone treats him.
That's a great point, especially when you look at those early experiences. His awakening, as he calls it, the confusion, sensory overload, and then to be immediately rejected by his own creator.
Yeah, you can't help but feel for him a little.
Right. And in those first moments, he's driven by curiosity, this thirst for knowledge. It's almost like a child discovering the world.
He even teaches himself to read by watching the DeLacy family.
And it's his empathy for them that always gets me. He feels their joys and sorrows so deeply, almost like they're his own, which, well, you know how the story goes, makes his later actions that much more tragic.
Yeah. He clearly craves that connection, wants to belong, be accepted, and he thinks maybe the DeLacys, especially the blind father, might offer him that.
And it leads to that scene where he carefully plans to reveal himself, choosing the blind father first, thinking he'd be less judgmental of his appearance.
A bit naive, maybe, but understandable given his limited experience with, well, humans.
And of course it backfires, horribly. The moment he shows himself to the whole family, they're terrified, react violently.
That must be a turning point for him, after building up so much hope to be met with that kind of rejection.
Absolutely. Feel like that's when the seeds of his rage, his desire for revenge, are truly planted.
And it makes sense. If the only thing people see is his appearance, if that's the basis for their fear and violence, it kind of reinforces the very thing they're afraid of, the otherness as they see it.
And it pushes him further down a dark path. Take his encounter with Victor's younger brother, William.
Yeah, that's chilling. It almost feels like he sees it as a way to inflict the same pain he's experienced onto Victor.
But even then, there were these glimpses of internal struggle. After he kills William, he finds a portrait of Victor's mother, and he's captivated by its beauty.
It's almost like he's capable of both monstrous rage and, strangely, tenderness.
It's like he's not a one-dimensional villain. His emotions are complex. There's good and evil there.
And then, of course, you have the wrongful execution of Justine Moritz, blamed for William's murder.
He knows she's innocent, but can't do anything to stop it.
Which naturally just deepens his resentment towards Victor, fuels his desire for a more direct confrontation.
And that leads us to that meeting in the Alps. The creature and Victor face to face.
Dramatic, to say the least.
But it's also where you really see the creature's eloquence. How he articulates his isolation, his yearning for companionship.
He doesn't just demand revenge, though. He offers a bargain.
Right. He demands Victor create a female companion for him, promises to leave humanity alone if Victor does.
It's a fascinating proposition. He knows he's capable of destruction, but believes companionship, someone who understands him, could change that.
Almost a glimmer of hope. But then
Victor destroys the female creature before she's finished, consumed by fear of what might happen.
I mean, I get where he's coming from.
Yeah.
But it's got to be devastating for the creature. Victor's actions basically confirm his worst fears, that he's a monster and always will be.
And it leads to that chilling vow from the creature, I will be with you on your wedding night, foreshadowing the revenge to come.
The pursuit of love and acceptance leading to the destruction of everything Victor holds dear.
And speaking of destruction, the murder of Elizabeth on Victor's wedding night.
Before we get into that, though, maybe we should take a moment to think about the significance of Victor destroying the female creature.
Absolutely. It's pivotal. Not just for the plot, but for those bigger ethical questions at the heart of Frankenstein.
So what makes it so significant?
On the surface, it seems like Victor's doing the responsible thing, afraid of the consequences, but he's refusing to consider that the creature could change, find peace.
So Victor's fear contributes to the tragedy.
Exactly, and it raises the question of responsibility. Victor created the creature, unleashed this force, but doesn't want to deal with the consequences.
It's like a cautionary tale. about scientific ambition without ethical considerations.
And that theme, it's still relevant today. Look at artificial intelligence, genetic engineering. Frankenstein reminds us to think about the should we, not just the can we.
Makes you wonder, if Victor had taken a different approach, tried to understand his creation, could things have ended differently?
A question worth pondering, but as we know, Victor chooses fear, and the consequences are, well, devastating.
Exploring the aftermath of Elizabeth's murder will definitely shed more light on the creature's psyche.
It will. It shows that ultimately his quest for connection leads to more isolation and despair. But let's save that for the next part of our deep dive. Picking up where we left off, that murder of Elizabeth on Victor's wedding night. It's just horrific. It's like all the creature's rage, all that pain comes to a head.
It really does. All that rejection, all the despair, it culminates in this moment. But even then, even in this act, his emotions aren't so simple.
No, not at all. He describes this triumph over Victor, this satisfaction at getting his revenge, but there's this twisted sense of grief, almost remorse. It's like on some level he understands the horror of what he's done, even as he's, well, reveling in it.
It reminds me of how he reacted to that portrait of Victor's mother. Even after killing William, he's drawn to the beauty of it.
It's like he's capable of both, the darkness and this strange tenderness.
It makes you realize he's not just some evil monster. He's complex. He feels things, love, grief, regret. But it's all twisted because of everything he's gone through.
And then there's that final encounter with Robert Walton, the explorer who finds him.
Right. And Walton, he's kind of like Victor in a lot of ways.
Yeah, both driven by ambition, a thirst for knowledge, pushing the boundaries. But Victor, he let that ambition consume him, lead him to destruction. Walton, though, he has a chance to choose a different path.
And the creature seems to see that. Like he sees a reflection of Victor and Walton, a chance to maybe break the cycle.
Exactly. When he confesses to Walton, tells his story, he's not just looking for forgiveness, he's trying to warn him, show him what unchecked ambition can lead to, the darkness that can consume even the most brilliant minds.
It's almost like he's trying to achieve some kind of redemption.
Yeah.
By preventing others from making the same mistakes.
And Walton, he's forced to confront his own ambition. He sees the potential for glory, but also for destruction.
Like, the creature's story is a mirror, forcing Walton to choose between following Victor's path or forging his own.
It's a pivotal moment, not just for Walton, but for the whole novel. It suggests that maybe there's hope. Even after all that darkness, maybe we can learn from each other's mistakes, from the need for compassion, for understanding.
And what about the creature, choosing to end his own life, walk off into the Arctic to die alone?
It's a complicated act. On one hand, it's despair. He knows he can never escape what he's done, the burden of his existence.
None.
But it's also defiance. He refuses to keep living in a world that rejects him, sees him only as a monster. In death, there's liberation, release from the chains of his existence.
A haunting ending. Leaves us with more questions than answers.
But that's the power of Frankenstein, isn't it? It doesn't give us easy answers. It makes us grapple with these complicated questions: creation, responsibility, the nature of good and evil, what it means to be human.
And in the creature's self-destruction, you see these broader themes. Isolation, that longing for connection, the devastating impact of rejection. These are things that still resonate today.
Absolutely. It's not just a horror story. It's a reflection on the human condition. It challenges us to confront our own fears, our prejudices, our capacity for both compassion and cruelty.
You know, throughout these excerpts, I keep noticing this imagery of light and darkness. It seems to be woven throughout the creature's story.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, it starts right at the beginning, his awakening in darkness, but he's drawn to knowledge, which he associates with light.
Right. And the DeLacy family, they're like a beacon of light for him. But his appearance, it casts a shadow. He wants to reach for the light, but the darkness keeps holding him back.
Exactly. It's like he's trapped in this constant twilight. And his encounters with Victor, they just make it worse. Victor is both the light of creation and the darkness of rejection.
It's that duality reflected in the creature's own emotions. The tenderness and the rage, they're constantly battling.
Even the settings reflect that conflict. He hides in forests and caves, but he's also drawn to the beauty of nature, the sunlight.
And his final journey takes him to the Arctic. This vast, icy wasteland, a visual representation of his despair. But even there, he finds Walton's ship, a speck of light in all that darkness.
So even facing his own death, he's still searching for connection.
The power of hope, right, even after everything.
And by sharing his story, offering that warning. It's like he's hoping for redemption, even if it's not for himself, but for others.
A beautiful thought. It makes you think about redemption in a more human sense. Can we learn from each other's mistakes, break free from the cycles of hatred and violence?
Or Frankenstein seems to suggest we can. That even in the face of terrible acts, there's still potential for empathy, understanding, change.
And that's a message we need today. As we face these new challenges, these new technologies, Frankenstein reminds us of the importance of compassion, responsibility, and the strength of the human spirit.
This deep dive has been, it's been a lot. Fascinating, but also unsettling.
I agree. We've gone deep into the creature's mind, seen his struggles, his pain, the consequences of being rejected.
And through his story, we've learned something about ourselves, the good and the bad, the need for connection, for empathy.
Even in the darkest stories, there's that glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption, a call to confront the darkness within us and work towards a world where understanding wins out.
Thinking back on everything we've discussed, what really sticks with me? It's that sense of loneliness. The creature, he's just so profoundly alone.
It's inescapable in his story. I mean, right from the start, fear, rejection, that basic need for connection, for someone to see him, it's just completely denied.
And it's not just that he's alone, it's that he's completely unique, utterly singular. There's literally no one else like him.
Yeah, he's in this strange in-between space. Human, but not. Monster, but also not quite. He sees how humans interact, but he can never truly be a part of it.
So when he begs Victor for a companion, it's heartbreaking. He's not just looking for someone to, be with. He wants someone who can see past his appearance, someone who understands that deep loneliness.
And Victor's refusal, that's what really seals his fate. Destroying the female creature, it's like telling him straight up, you are unlovable. You'll always be alone.
It's brutal. That's discourse. It fuels that rage, that need for revenge. But even then, even at his worst, he still shows those glimpses of wanting connection, like when he confesses to Walton.
Yeah. He's not just looking for forgiveness. I think he wants to be understood.
And there's real vulnerability in that. To share his story, his fears, his desires. He's opening himself up to the one thing he both wants and dreads: judgment.
And Walton, he becomes like us, the readers. We're faced with that choice. Do we judge, condemn, or do we try to understand?
It's a test of empathy, isn't it? To look past those monstrous actions and see the pain underneath. That loneliness, the longing for something he can never have.
And it raises a big question. Can we, as humans, ever truly understand something so different, something created in a lab, denied those basic human connections?
Profound questions. And that's what makes Frankenstein so powerful. It's not just horror. It's about what it means to be human. The good, the bad, the need for each other.
And it leaves us with this unease. Could things have gone differently? If Victor had shown compassion, embraced his creation, would the creature's path have changed?
A question that hangs over the whole story. And it's one we should be asking ourselves today. With artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, all these technologies pushing boundaries, what are our responsibilities?
We have to remember what we create reflects who we are, our values, our fears. Frankenstein is a reminder to think about not just what we can do, but what kind of world we want to build.
Well, this has been a fascinating and, as you said, unsettling deep dive into Frankenstein. Seeing the creature's story, his struggles, it's given us a lot to think about.
It has. We've seen the dark side of humanity, but also that potential for good, that need for connection, and the power of empathy, even in the face of, monstrosity.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest stories, there's always hope. Thank you all for joining us on this exploration of Frankenstein. May this story stay with you and challenge you as you navigate the complexities of, just being human.